So thank you for making the time today. I am actually really excited. This is our first group coaching call. And, it's one of those things that we're trying as we go along. So I'm really excited to hear from each of you and to hear what you've come up with as you have worked on this content. So just a quick review. So let me just give you the overview of what's going to happen over the next hour, and then a quick review of where we started. So we're going to start off with that quick review of story and what Ian took you through last week. We're then going to go around, and each of you are going to tell the story that you've been working on. So your homework from the last session was to use the story spine and come up with a story, and it could have been the story that you created out of the first session, or it could be a new story. We're going to go around and everybody is going to tell their story. You're going to take 2 minutes tops to go through it. And then we might have just a comment or two from Ian and I, and then we'll move to the next person. I will ask each of you sort of randomly, so we'll be muted for the first part of this, just so that we're being conscientious of noise. But then once we get through that story portion, we're then going to go into questions, comments, group coaching. And the group coaching piece is not just coaching from Ian and I, although we will be doing a lot of that, but group coaching also includes peer coaching. And peer coaching is one of the most important parts of being in a cohort like this, because learning it isn't just about consuming the information. It's also about applying it. And we apply it when we do it ourselves, but we also apply it when we help others to learn it. So peer coaching is the process by which you're applying it through the lens of the person who's next to you. And we do this a lot with large groups, and it's incredible to watch how the peer coaches develop so quickly on some of the areas that they were struggling with. So peer coaching is something that's encouraged, and we want you to all be part of that. And then we're going to save about 10 minutes at the end, and Ian is going to take us through the story spine, but actually applying it with a little bit more rigor. So we're going to have some fun. It's a great exercise, and that's where we'll complete. Now, all the way through, if you're muted and you do want to make a comment, use the chat bar. You'll see it down at the bottom. I want you all right now to type in yes if you can see the chat bar, so I know you know where to find it. All right, thanks, Sushila. Yeah, Josh, Danny, great. Thank you so much, guys. Use it. It's really important. This gives us that kind of interactivity. All right. So let's go to where we left off. So in our last session, Ian took us expertly through story. And he talked a lot about what stories do to our brain. And the reality is that our brain loves stories. It lights up. 7 different parts of the brain light up. And that's important because our brain works through cross-functioning. All of those parts work together and it creates memories. You see, stories actually are the key to the unconscious mind. If you think about it, stories actually make people go unconscious. And it's such an interesting thing, right? We constantly think about how can we, in fact, get into that unconscious part of the brain, because that's the place where we work on an autonomic level. And so when our stories go there, we're actually working with people's unconscious. So it's very, very powerful. The other thing that's happening with stories is that you are now in the area of the emotions. You're no longer in literal, you're in emotional content. And when you're telling your story, the more that you can relive your experience, the more that we, as the audience, live it along with you. We experience those emotions that's the neurocoupling and mirroring part of our brain. We're mirroring to you, we're mirroring it to stories that we know, because our stories really are meta stories. All stories are. And what I mean by meta stories is that while I may not have experienced your exact story, I likely have experienced something similar, whether it be joy or loss or one of the other very powerful emotions that can be transmitted through stories. Everybody in the audience has experienced something like that. So when they're listening to your particular story, their brain is going to the place where they last or most prominently experienced that emotion. And so now what's happening is they are experiencing your story as their story. They project themselves into that story. And when we can do this, this is how we make impact. This is how we can convey an idea in a powerful way so that it is remembered, so that it is acted upon, and so that we can create the changes in the world that we are all looking to change, all looking to do. So that's a little bit about story. I'm going to stop there, and we're going to now go into your stories. So, all right, I am going to randomly choose someone. Andrew Haller. You want to start? We'll start off with you because I know you're a great
Somehow I knew I was going to get picked first.
See, it was coming to me. I could feel it.
Yeah. Long time no see, Andrea. I miss you.
Miss you too.
So I did the story spine and I took a couple of notes. I didn't like script it out and write it all out. So I'm kind of like
okay. That's great. That's exactly
this a little bit. So a close group of friends and I, before COVID and everything like that, met up often to play board games. Sort of what we do. We realized that playing a board game is really hard when you can't all be in a room together right now. So we decided to sort of pivot a little bit and try out RPGs, role-playing games. Now, none of us have had very much experience with RPGs, but I've played one time called 10 Candles. And it's called 10 Candles because you lower the lights in the room and the entire room is just illuminated by 10 candles. And this sort of like tragic horror RPG storytelling game where this sounds grim, but you're essentially narrating your own death. It's an amazing, interesting game where you're being attacked by these things in the dark and you're trying to get away from them. But when the candles go out, all the lights are out from the room and the game's over and everyone's dead. It's amazing. So I'm sitting in this room with Fee and just a computer with all my friends on Zoom, trying to teach them how to play this game over Zoom with this sort of circle of 10 candles because we wanted to do something different. We wanted to try something new, and there's an importance in staying connected in these times. And so this is one of the things that we were trying to do in order to keep connected with our friends. It turned out to be a hilarious night. Everyone kind of didn't really get it at first, and we didn't get through a whole game. We're going to pick it back up on Wednesday. So now every Wednesday is RPG night. But by the end of the game, people are really starting to get into character and actually storytelling rather than just saying like, I'm going to walk over here and kind of like really painting the picture of the world and whatnot. And so people started really picking it up. And so I'm excited for next Wednesday where we're going to try it again. Oh, you're on mute, Andrea.
Yeah, great. Thank you. We can do that's right, or clap. That was great. So I'm wow, I actually want to play that game. Sounds really interesting.
I'll send you the rules. I have it as a PDF. Like I bought the electronic version. I'll just email them to you.
That'd be fantastic.
It'd be a great exercise for your coaching at some point in time. It's amazing for storytelling.
I'm looking forward to it. Great. All right. Kate Grant, let's go with you next.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to warn everyone, I have a cough. I do not have the sickness. I just have really terrible allergies. So you're probably going to hear me do that a couple times. And yeah, I was just outside too. So it's like doubly worse. So those that don't know me know I have adopted Kentucky as my home state. I'm from Ottawa. I'm French Canadian. I have nothing to do with the South, but a couple of years ago, we took our first trip down to Kentucky and completely fell in love with it. There is no more beautiful place in the world as Kentucky. So, I mean, last time we were going down there, and this was before everything happened with COVID, and we get to the border, And it's kind of weird, like when you go down, because nobody expects you to say you're going to Louisville, Kentucky for a vacation. It's not the average place to go. We go once a year and we stock up on our bourbon. You can't see it, but I have a whole shelf full of all these rare and exotic bourbons that you can get. So we get up to the border, and the border cross guard is looking at us, and he's going, "What's your business in Kentucky, ma'am?" And I'm sitting there, and it's hot and it's summer, and the car is really hot because we've been sitting trying to go through customs for like 2 hours because for whatever reason the Ambassador Bridge was crazy that day. And I'm going, well, we're going down. We're going to go drink some bourbon and listen to some good country music. And this crossing, the guard looks at me and he looks at my partner and he's like, "All right, ma'am, y'all have a good day now." And we get across the border. So we're driving down. And when you hit Kentucky, because you pass this really cool water tower that just says, "Welcome to Florence, y'all." And it's all painted with magnolias and it's everything beautiful. And we get there and, we go through all of our favorite bourbon distilleries. We do this really cool tasting room experience in one of the oldest distilleries in rickhouses in Kentucky that is it's technically owned by Old Forester. I had to actually look at the bottle, remember the name. It's actually owned by Old Forester, which is a big brand, but they do these little micro distilleries. And we stock up on all this bourbon. We're going back across the border finally. And I'm turning to my partner. I'm going, "We're way over the limit. We're way over the limit. Like, we can't have this many bottles." So we pull over into a Dunkin' Donuts, the classiest of classy places. And we're taking the bottles and we're putting them in the wheel well of the car. And we're thinking, act cool. Everyone act cool. And we're going across and the guard looks at us and he goes, "You just got those 2 bottles in your suitcases in the back seat there?" We're like, "Yes, sir." "Nobody talk to us." "Yes, sir. That's all we have." And he's like, "Do you have anything in the trunk?" And we're like, "No, we have nothing in the trunk. There might be an air mattress." And he kind of looks at us and like eyes us up and down. He goes, "Well, y'all have a good day and go carry on." And we get back to Toronto with our way over the limit bourbon.
That's great. That is great. So first of all, I think we're all going to Kate's at some point to drink bourbon. And secondly, I think Kate and Josh need to chat. I think there's some synergies in their love of perhaps fine.
Kate, Old Forester is part of my portfolio.
Oh, you are like my new favorite person then.
Yeah, no, I'm a lot of people's favorite friend.
Yeah.
We'll chat.
You can see there's the bourbon shelf. It's part of the collection, not all of it.
Mine's a little bigger.
Fantastic. All right. Well, I think it sounds like there's gonna be some partying. We might need Josh to mail out stuff to all of us. I'm just saying, so we can all have that virtual drink together before we can do it together. All right. Josh, since we've got you, why don't we go next with you?
I knew that was coming. I'm going to set a precursor right here. I do not hate my parents. This story is very unique. It was an educational for a child that turned into the story that is working towards perfection with Talk Boutique. So, spine information. Ian, thank you. Last week it was amazing to kind of get an understanding of what's going to be happening for this story, and I realized my imperfections in planning, and hopefully I've corrected them. I've actually put a title to my story because of the fact that I think it's a good segue into the riveting information I'm going to be dropping right now. And it's called The Joneses. It's a story about my family, and truly I think what was the biggest downfall in my parents' separation, even though that's very ominous and dark. It's more about making decisions from the heart. So it starts with my father, who's a very modest man, quite happy, but obviously feel very pressure. And my mother. My mother was a very driven woman, and she was working very hard to make a name for herself in a small community. It was called Font Hill, Ontario. And in Font Hill, there was a thing happening in the 80s where everybody was evolving and growing and becoming more awesome. And you could tell there was competition. And in turn, the title of this story, The Joneses. So there's another smaller town in New York, and it's called Ellicottville. And basically, all the people from Font Hill, Ontario were showing how amazing they were by buying a second home at the time. And the story and the theory that I have is that this pressure that was created from having a second home and keeping up with the Joneses might have been the downfall of the actual thing that my family was trying to achieve, which was become closer, get better, and be a more tight-knit family. So having this second home created some physical pressures and obviously some mental pressures that created too much pressure for my family, which in turn probably provided me with one of the best learning experiences I've ever had, which is when you make decisions out of heart, it's usually easier to deal with the outcome rather than making decisions based on ego or finance. Quick little story, guys. 2 minutes to hit it.
Great. Thank you. That was great. Sorry, my cat has decided to join us. Those of you who have spoken with me individually will know that I have a couple of very needy cats, one who cries a lot, and then the other one who must be with me when I'm on conference calls. So Olive will make an appearance throughout this call. I'll just warn you. Okay, one thing I didn't note up front, and I just want to be respectful, that we actually have two of our other coaches on the call today, Patricia and Liz, and both of them are here really just watching, and they will jump in and coach as they need to, but they're here, they won't be giving stories today. So I just wanted to point that out in case you were wondering. All right. Let's go with Sushila. Sorry. I can't get my mouth to work this morning, apparently. Sushila.
Okay. Hi, everybody. So it was February 29th of 2020. And I was invited to attend an inspirational speaking competition. And I actually wasn't planning to be there, but I got to know one of the organizers who gifted me a ticket, and he said, "I think you should sign up for the open mic. I think you should present." And speaking is something that I've always really enjoyed and have been and actually pretty decent at. I'll say good at. I think and so I put my name on the list for the open mic position. I think there was at least 50 people who'd signed up. And funnily enough, I got selected. And while I was on stage, I shared my journey of overcoming bullying and how by persevering through that challenge in my life, it actually led me to levels of leadership that I never envisioned was possible for myself. After I got off stage, I had 10, 15 people come up to me sharing that how much they resonated with my story and wanted to hear more from me and felt that this was part of my purpose. And it was definitely one of the most electrifying experiences of my life. And it's now catapulted me, one, to be here, but also to start sharing my message more and my stories more openly with the world. There you go.
Thank you, Sushila. That's beautiful. And congratulations on doing that. That's quite an accomplishment. I know it's not easy to get up and to share any story, but a story of bullying. I can only imagine how difficult that was. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Was that Speaker Slam?
Yes, it was.
Just the way you described it. Was it Dan that you talked to?
Uh-huh.
Nice. I'm going to do this with a few other people as well, but just while we're here. Okay, so it was Speaker Slam. They're still at the Lulu Lounge, right?
Yeah.
Okay. What was the lounge like when you were walking on stage? What's the stage like? Just give us a couple of things that you noticed about walking sort of into that area, because it's a very specific room. It's really cool.
Yeah. So this part I didn't include, but so the room was full. It was absolutely packed.
Yeah, it gets packed and really, really warm. Nice.
Yeah, it's packed. It's warm. I was actually highly emotional coming up on stage. So,
how many stairs are there?
I think there were five.
Yeah, were you a little bit paranoid about the stairs, like getting up them cleanly? There's also, it's a bit of a thrust stage, so you're right in the middle of that dense crowd.
Yeah, I honestly, I kind of felt like I had a bit of tunnel vision where it kind of just everything didn't exist. I was just, my body was just moving
Yeah.
where I needed to go. I don't know. It's like time and space sort of disappeared for me. That was
Yeah.
my.
Out of body, it happens. I love it.
Oh yeah.
That's the best time. It's when you flourish.
I want everyone to right now just, are you in that room with Sushila right now? Can you see it?
By the way, who's been in that room? Not that room, the Lulu Lounge. That room in terms of that experience, that huge crowd, a little bit bigger than maybe you might expect, really warm, but also that feeling of like you walk up the stairs and it's like, oh, time just disappeared. You know, do a little wave if you've been in that room or that kind of presentation before.
So less so the room description, but what really resonated with me was that tunnel vision where you don't remember what the room looked, but you're like so freaked out that all the details disappear. Adding that to the story, like that made it real for me.
Yeah. So think about that. So if Sushila had started this off, I'm just going to give you a little bit because I want you all to feel this. So it was February 20th. I was at an inspirational speaker event. It was in a large bar-like room. The place was crowded. It was thick with heat because of the nerves of all the other speakers and the excitement of the crowd. I had put my name into Get Up and Speak on their open mic. I was terrified that I was going to be chosen, and sure enough, I was. I had to get up from my seat. I had to walk that long walk to the stage and then climb 5 stairs without tripping to get to that stage. And then I had to walk across and out to the very center of the stage. I was beginning to sweat. I could smell the tension in the room. So now, every one of you, are you there? Are you there in that room? Can you see it? Can you smell it? Can you feel it? That's the power of story. We've engaged your brain. So you see how that opening piece, because that was just the environment. That's all I was doing. And I did layer in a couple of other things, but it was the environment. So when you're telling your story, so we're going to go on to the next person. Just think about that. Think about how you can start to use those sensory cues, because that's all I was doing. I'm using sensory cues and building a visual. All right, Victoria, I know you've had some experience with this.
Sweating on stage. Yes, but more. I'm a former dancer / I still teach dance, so that's my capacity. And apologies if there's noise in the background. I live with 5 people. I'm back home with family, so sorry. But I wanted to share a story of a time in my early 20s with everything going on in the world right now. In China, I actually traveled a lot in China with my ex-boyfriend, and my first trip there, I was about 21, and we did a backpacking trip on like $1,000 over a month. And one of our final destinations was Beijing, which is the capital of China. And we were there just before Chinese New Year's was about to start. So it was hustling and bustling. And we had this ultimate goal of getting to the Leaping Tiger Gorge, which is pretty much equivalent to traveling from the East Coast to the West Coast of Canada. It's like a 55-hour train ride. So we were in Beijing, of course, being spontaneous and silly young adults. We did not pre-book our train ride to get to the Leaping Tiger Gorge. So when we arrived at the very overwhelmingly busy train station, we went to get tickets, and they told us, you know, there's no trains for a day, come back tomorrow. So we came back the next day, and the only tickets we could get were standing tickets. Now, I don't know if any of you have traveled to Southeast Asia, but a standing ticket pretty much means you're going to be in TTC rush hour traffic type experience. So we got on our train and we were literally face to face with about 200 Chinese people, and we're 100% the only foreigners on that train. And I was very overwhelmed and nervous and had no idea what to expect for the next 55 hours, but it was one of the most amazing experiences of my life. I learned the power of being surrounded by strangers and them eventually warming up to you, and the curiosity of people. And, you know, at the end of the day, after that 55-hour train ride, a lot of those people became friends that I stayed in touch with for years and years and years, and who barely spoke English. So in all of this time of social distancing, I keep coming back to that memory because it was an opportunity where I really got to connect and impact complete strangers' lives and share stories and realize how much we had in common with one another. So I hope to be able to have those experiences soon, once this is all over again.
What a vivid memory.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's great. All right. Danny.
Hi, sorry. Can you all hear me? My Wi-Fi is a little shoddy here. Okay, great. Yeah, my name's Danny. I'm Victoria's business partner, actually. So I knew I would be following you, Victoria. I'll try and keep it short, but a couple friend invited me and my husband up north to somewhere just outside of Orangeville, and to this little tiny cabin. It was the middle of summer. It was beautiful. The cabin was so cool. It was so small. It only fit about 2 or 3 people, and we all squished into that cabin. And our friend said we brought something with us. And so they opened up this little baggie, and there's mushrooms, magic mushrooms, not just regular mushrooms. And so we said, cool, we'll try anything once. Sounds like a great idea. So we all cheersed and took our little tiny bit of mushrooms, and half an hour goes by, and like the rookies we were, we said, let's just take some more because no one's feeling anything. And so we took some more, and about an hour later, definitely hit us. And my friends are frolicking outside and laughing, and everyone's laughing hysterically. And I was sitting with my husband laughing hysterically. And it turned into this serious, hysterical cry. And I couldn't stop crying for what felt like, I think it felt like 10 minutes. And I looked at my clock after, and it had been about 3 hours of me just crying. Like, I didn't even know I had that amount of tears in me. And no one else was crying. It was just me. So I felt very alone and kind of isolated from everyone because, you know, why was I feeling like this? And everyone was super happy. And so anyway, fast forward 2 years, I never touched them. I didn't even think about doing them again because I had this, you know, horrible experience. And so I actually learned a little bit more about mushrooms and other psychedelics. And my experience was actually really normal. And I think I really tapped into something that was like really deep in me that I kind of let out during that experience. And it was a really, really great experience knowing that it was a very normal thing that happened to me, instead of thinking this wasn't supposed to happen to me. This was the wrong experience, or you shouldn't do this again. And instead now I'm kind of looking at it as it was a moment of strength that I could tap in that deep and be vulnerable. And I actually kind of am looking forward to a similar experience, maybe not necessarily on psychedelics, but tapping into that experience and that deep to kind of really learn more about myself and get to kind of let all of these emotions come out of me. So I'm looking forward to that. And yeah, I hope everyone tries psychedelics once in their life.
Amazing. Amazing. Good. Congratulations. What a great, and thank you for sharing that, because I think there's such profound wisdom in what you're sharing, and however you get there. But that connecting to that vulnerability is such an important message. And thank you. So I think we have one last person. That would be Michael. I think everybody else has gone, right? Yes, I think I've seen everyone else. So Michael, you get to close us off.
Thanks. And you're going to see that in spite of these amazing, intimate, personal stories, I'm going to tell a story about Dorothy the cabbage. So obviously I got the brief completely wrong and I've scripted it. So here goes. Dorothy the cabbage was raised on a sun-filled, windy farm in the Canadian prairies. She was an only child and spent much of her time playing on her own or with some of the rabbits in the field. She was a quiet cabbage, and despite rarely raising her hand in class, her teachers knew they could always count on her to get her homework done every night. But Dorothy was approaching an important date in her life's calendar, a moment when she was expected to move to the next phase of her life, independence. This moment could be a chance for her to move forward with confidence or to cower with fear. As the day neared, Dorothy began to imagine herself as the cabbage she wanted to be, strong, colorful, proud. Feeling the warm sun on her face, she stood tall among the other cabbages in her row. As the pickers moved through, they couldn't help but notice what a unique specimen she had become. She was radiant. She was so radiant, she wasn't placed with the other cabbages and sent to market. She was sent on a unique mission to grace the kitchen of the farm where she was raised. An honor indeed. So that's it. Obviously.
That's amazing. What a beautiful story. What a beautiful story.
No relationship with Dorothy. This is literally, I thought we were making up a story.
Look, and that was the brief. Just make up a story, whatever the story is. It could be from your personal life, or it could be about Dorothy the cabbage. And I love Dorothy the cabbage. And what a metaphor. There's so many things that could be a metaphor for. We're going to talk about that in our next session. So I'm not going to go too deep into that, but there's something really powerful there. And there's something really powerful in all of the stories that you've shared. From the vulnerability, there was an element of vulnerability in whether it was Dorothy the cabbage and her moving to the next level of her life, or Danny with the vulnerability of touching something very deeply held, or Sushila of getting on stage and sharing a very vulnerable moment. Vulnerability, and there was moments of vulnerability in everyone's. And the thing about vulnerability is that when we pair it up with challenge, which each of you did, there was some form of challenge in those stories or opportunity. If we follow that story spine, there was, what was the issue or opportunity that came up? So we had some vulnerability in there, and we had the challenge or opportunity. And that allowed us all to become introspective. That helped us to go inward so that we're listening to your story through the lens of our story. And when, as many of you came to the conclusion, there was a victory. Dorothy got picked to be on the table of the farmer. Sushila overcame that fear of talking about being bullied in front of a room full of people. And Victoria, you talked about sort of this amazing moment of meeting all of these incredible people on that very, very long train ride who have become now lifelong friends. But when the challenge meets victory, we're intrigued, and then we're inspired. So stories take us through that journey of vulnerability and challenge and victory, and they allow us to become introspective and intrigued and inspired. And that is how we move people into the place of being receptive to the ideas that we want them to hold. So I'm going to stop there. I'm going to ask you to all unmute yourself, and let's talk about what we just heard. So, and feel free, this is going to be an open conversation now. And again, so feel free to, ask a question or provide a comment to one of your other peers on what you heard, what you liked, what you think could be better. And I'm going to throw it to Ian and just say, maybe you want to start off and we can go from there. And again, like I said, feel free to jump in at any time.
Yeah, I thought, first of all, I thought everybody did a great job. One thing I'm going to encourage people to do, because I do this with my writing classes, is, so you all worked on these stories for what, like months, right? You know, several revisions, everything like that. There's no need for an apology. And it's funny, we often tend to, when we create something, then apologize for it, especially when it's in like the creative process. So for instance, you tell a story of a cabbage. That's great. Like, that's fantastic, right? Joshua, your story was fantastic, right? And it had such clear messaging. And I don't think you needed to apologize for it at all in terms of its content or anything like that. I think the vulnerability that you showed with that story was fantastic. So one thing I'm going to say to everybody is, we're all working through this, and we're going to be working through this over the next few months, perhaps, together. And even then, it's never perfect. So give yourself permission, especially when you're creating it, that trust that your audience is going to be interested. All of you spoke with so many details that popped. All of you clearly took the story spine lessons and like thought of places where you could apply it. It's fantastic. Two things I would suggest that you can do, especially once you've told your story a couple of times. One, think in terms of taking some simple details and just, is there a way to change it and become more specific without making your story longer? And I'm also going to do this. I'm going to do this with Kate, because you had, it's going to lead into the second thing that I'm going to ask, because there's a question I have. So you described the water tower like so clearly with all those flowers. When you drove down there, what kind of car did you drive in?
I'm trying to remember if it was our old car or new car. I think it was our Mazda. Yeah.
Nice. What color was it? Do you know?
I actually don't. Is that embarrassing?
No, not at all. Right? Is there a specific detail you remember about the car? Did it tend to like have like a clunky alternator? Was there anything specific? Was it was it a clean car? Did you? Our car is always a little bit messy if we have the pets.
It's messy. So my partner uses it for his law firm, and basically it's full of files 90% of the time.
Nice. So if you had just, like you just say, we drove down there on our Mazda, usually it's, you know, my partner's car and it's filled with law files. We didn't bring those with us to the States. That little specific detail might pop. Can you give me one detail? Do you remember the border guard at all? The first one when you were crossing the border? Were they like a little bit burly? Were they very serious? Were they kind of the jokester?
He was very Southern. And it was weird because he was in Michigan, yeah, Detroit, Michigan, yeah. And it was weird because he was definitely from like Texas or Missouri.
Yeah. Oh, nice. So like, even if it's just the case of like their accent was pretty thick, right? Or they were even just very Southern, like that image. And that image, by the way, that's a great description. It's specific. It's going to pop a little different for everybody listening. So, and that's how you can take a story and not make it longer, but just take one maybe short adjective or adverb, or just change something from, say, I think I used in the previous sessions, it's not a tree, it's an oak. Now the question I have, because this is the other thing sometimes you can do, is once you've told the story a few times, record it, especially if it's a short one, listen to it, but listen to it as if you didn't know your own story, and ask yourself, are there questions that you'd have listening to this story? And so the reason why I'm going to pick Kate is, so Kate described how much she likes bourbon, and she mentioned that she has you know, a tray of bourbons behind her that she's brought up. Just out of interest, did anybody have a question that popped into their head around the time that Kate was telling that part of her story?
What bourbon?
What's your favorite bourbon, right? Or what's a bourbon that you like? So Kate, do you have a favorite bourbon on that tray, or one that like you happen to be drinking right now?
So my favorite is the Rabbit Hole Derringer, which is done in, yeah, if you know it, you know it. It is pretty amazing. And then my all-time favorite, though, is Angel's Envy, which is a really small distillery. And it's funny because the first time we went there, they were actually not even open. They were still doing construction, but they had bottles, and we kind of just went to the door, and there was a guy there and the door was unlocked. He was like, oh yeah, we're actually closed, but we can totally just give you a tasting. And we just
That's better than the real thing. That's awesome.
Yeah. And so we ended up he ended up selling us like 3 bottles of it, and we brought it back. And now every year we go down just to get that in the Derringer.
Yeah. Did anybody notice that when she mentioned the bourbon, did anybody look at Josh? Because Josh, you had mentioned that you like bourbon. And
Yeah.
Josh was like, and now we've engaged our audience so effectively with one specific detail, and you brought people in. So think of the specific details that you can change along the way that are a little bit broader, but also just once you've had a chance to tell the story a couple of times, listen to it. And are there questions that you want to ask? Classics are when you say like, I really like this thing. I want an example. All right. Cool. And those were my observations. I open it back up to the floor.
I'm reading The Blind Assassin by Margaret Atwood, and I find as an author, she's a gifted, not elaborator, but just the vividness of her language in terms of painting a scene and making you feel it.
Her essays are like that too. The amazing thing about Margaret Atwood is because she was a poet, there were elements of that in even her critical thought.
Right.
They still popped emotionally, even when she was making a what we call a rational argument.
As you're thinking about the stories you heard, was anyone here left with a question for any of their peers on what happened or where to go?
I have a question on how do you stand for 55 hours in a train?
Great question.
I don't even understand the physics of that.
Well, I feel like the real juice of that story is what happened on the train ride. So after listening to myself say it, I felt like I should have spent more time maybe sharing an experience or two that happened. But I ended up befriending like a Chinese grandma who like braided my hair, and I sat on her lap and taught her English. And then, there was like 5 kids on the train ride, and I have a natural inclination to teach. So I'm there teaching them a dance class on the train. All their parents are like, "Why Goren?" which is white foreign girl. I'm having me on camera. So, that's where but the reason I stood for 55 hours is because I didn't stand. Everyone gave up their seat for me and my partner at least once. So cool. Like I fell asleep in that grandma's lap, like complete stranger.
Wow.
Yeah.
Look at the power of that. Like we're all I have shivers from that. Like there's just such beauty of human kindness in that in that story. And so see how powerful that is. What can you embed in there? What a beautiful, beautiful story.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
I realized I want to change my story.
So what do you want to change it to? Tell us.
I'm not even sure. Well, honestly, I was just thinking about all the travels. Like I've been to 75 countries. Like I've got so many stories. It's stupid. I forget most of them. And then I come up with one that I thought was going to be able to evolve a little bit more, but it's kind of empty. So I'd probably tell a story about Cambodia. I went to Cambodia and had an amazing 24 hours. It was not good in any way, shape, or form. I was scared for 75% of it. It started with an amazing trip from the airport in a tuk-tuk where I stuck my arm out the window and the driver turned around and told me to put my arm in as it may get chopped off. That was a nice segue into the start of that trip. I ended up getting sick on that same tuk-tuk, spent 6 hours in my hotel room with a swollen left foot. Then had to go out and host an event. It was quite unique. It was a very unique scenario as I decided to stay after with the owner of that bar and walk home. And that's not something that you practice in Cambodia. Yeah, so as I was walking home, I realized how much danger I was actually in, sweating, being a 6'2" white man in Cambodia, pretty much target on my back. Was kind of scary, but made it back to the hotel without even knowing where I really was. It was a very, very scary scenario, but We made it through, and I probably have one more hair on my chest because of it.
If I can jump in there, so the idea of, like Andrea's mentioned, the idea of how we share stories, and it almost doesn't matter if we've experienced the same thing. So first of all, when you say Cambodia, at least 3 people actually did this on their screens. So I'm going to guess that perhaps they've either been to Cambodia or want to. But here's the thing. I have not been to Cambodia. But when you said the walk home thing, you heard me laugh, because I have been to Naples. And I've been to Naples, Italy, when the sun started going down, walking one way while the light was still there, getting to a museum and going, so I came this way from my hostel, and I'm just wondering, and getting that far, and the person went, yeah, you're not going home that way. So whether or not we've been to Cambodia, we've been in that situation. So much of your audience, by the way, even if they haven't traveled, they may have been in that situation in their home city, in their hometown, that walking home, I've waited a little too long or gone perhaps 1 block too far, and I'm not completely comfortable with this. So that's what you did. By all you needed to do was say Cambodia, and I was walking home and uncomfortable. And the weird thing is, I'm right there, even if I'm not in your exact place. I thought that was great. That was fantastic.
June up there.
Liz, I think you wanted to say something.
Hi, everybody. I'm the person lurking in the background, listening to all your fantastic stories. And I just said to Andrea, can I say something? Is that okay? I feel compelled to do it, so I hope you don't mind. Victoria and Joshua, you just both shared sort of what I would call the story part 2. And it's funny because I think when we create stories, we write stories, we're editing all the time and trying to say, is that interesting? I don't know if that's interesting. And sometimes we end up with a cursory story because we've tried to refine it so much. And we're kind of panicked about what's going to be interesting and what's not. Victoria and Joshua, the 2 stories you just told just now were fantastic. Like Victoria, everything you just said, sitting on that woman's lap, you had your hair braided, teaching kids to dance. That's an amazing story. Joshua, that quick 30 seconds of your trip to Cambodia, like I was riveted. So I think the challenge is always going to be to let yourself go enough to actually tell the story versus write a story you think people are going to like. And that's a challenge. It's not easy, right?
Thanks for that, Liz.
Yeah,
absolutely. And you know what? I absolutely agree. I think I learned so much, not just about your stories, Victoria and Joshua, in those 2 short stories, but about you. I learned about you, and that's what stories do. You know, as we said, I may not have stood for 55 hours on a train, but I have been in an uncomfortable situation with a lot of strangers where suddenly the discomfort became the opening for a new opportunity. And so we have these. Now, I want you to think about all the stories you've told. What idea that you might want the world to know about could live as a moral or a segue from that story. So I want you to keep that in your mind. And we've got about 10 minutes left, and I promised you and I would save 10 minutes for us to do an exercise. So I'm going to pass it over to Ian, because now we are actually going to create a story together. But I want you to start thinking about this idea of what is the idea that lives inside. So Ian, I'll hand it to you.
Okay. We're going to tell a very simple story. Everybody's going to get 1 sentence, but everybody's going to have a specific role in this story. And I'm just going to go through the order of the people I see on screen. Every sentence will begin with a specific opening. So the first person is literally going to open with "Once upon a time." And we're going to find out, what we're going to do is we're going to follow that story spine. So we're going to start with our first 3 sentences, just exploring the world and exploring the environment, and then the characters involved in that environment. So the first person, when they speak, they're going to give us the name of just a character, and then something about where that place is, where that character is. And there's just a couple of details to that. So it might be like, you know, once upon a time, Boris lived in an exotic forest in the middle of Narnia. All right. Second person and the third person are both going to begin their sentences with "and every day," and we're going to paint a little bit of what happens in that place. The first person who does it is going to specifically paint some more details about the environment, and then the second person is going to paint a few more details about what the people do every day in that place. So we're setting up the world so we understand what's going to happen in our story. The fourth person gets, "but then one day," and we're going to find out something new. Something, what's the issue or the opportunity, right? What's the premise of this story? Most of the rest of the story is going to be, and because of this, and because of this, and because of this. We're going to begin every sentence with that as we explore that thing and we find out why it matters, how it changed the world. And then the final person is going to be, "and ever since that day," which is basically the moral of the story. Don't worry, I'll coach you through each one. The other thing that might happen after each one is I might ask you one quick question just to get you to think more specifically. Okay, so Sushila, let's start with once upon a time, and give us the name of one person in this and a couple of details about where this person is. Okay, we're telling this all, by the way, generally third person, past tense. Don't worry about it too much. Okay. All right, when you're ready.
Okay. Once upon a time, there was a young girl named Dorothy in an open field in an open field. We'll just go with that.
That's perfect. Specific details don't need a lot. Okay. Now, because I said I'd do this, I'm going to, but I thought what you did was great. By the way, and in the interest of time, I'm not going to open this up to the floor, but some people may have already gone. When they heard the name of our hero, did anybody go, haha? Because you've done something pretty cool where you've referenced something that happened before. If you do that in a conference, say, or even a presentation where somebody's presented before you at a meeting, that's wonderful, right? We've already heard the name Dorothy today. You mentioned the open field, right? And that's fantastic. We can see it. Give me one specific detail about that open field. Is it a huge field? Is it filled with wheat?
I'm going to say filled with wheat because that's what I was thinking. Yeah.
Fantastic. So an open field filled with wheat. All right. So once upon a time, young girl, young, only one specific detail, but that pops. So let's find out a little bit more about this open field of wheat that Dorothy lives in. All right, Michael, and every day, and you're going to describe a little bit more about this open field and the environment where Dorothy lives.
Every day, Dorothy gathered her net and made her way down to the swamp.
Ooh, nice. Could you name that swamp for me, please?
Sure, the Tyler's Swamp.
Nice. And it's funny, we don't know who Tyler is, but that swamp just became specific. Really, really nice. Okay, cool. Kate, and every day, let's add a second character to this because it's the way that people interact, the relationships that can really make things pop. So, and every day, Dorothy met somebody down at Tyler's Swamp. I wonder what his name might be.
And every day, Dorothy met Franklin down at Tyler's Swamp to go fishing.
Nice. What did they fish for?
Minnows?
Nice. They went fishing for minnows. That's delightful. Okay. So, so we've said 3 sentences, but we know that this young woman, Dorothy, lives in an open field of wheat. And every day she gathers flowers, goes down to Tyler's swamp where she meets Franklin, and together they fish for minnows. This is such a lovely, specific picture. Really, really great. Okay. Joshua, but then one day,
Dorothy realized she has allergies.
to what?
Wheat.
Nice. Right? And it's great because there's a couple of things that could, this is why specific details are great, is even though when I'm teaching people storytelling, and especially if it's an improv class where it's like, listen, you're not going to edit this. Do the thing the audience wants, which is usually based on what they've heard before. So how many people thought it was either going to be wheat or minnows? Give a little wave, right? So by picking one of those 2 things, you've helped the audience stay there. Storytelling can actually be very simple. Okay, so one day, Dorothy discovered that she was allergic to wheat. You notice how short that premise is? And yet it's clear. We know what the issue is. All right, Andrew, and because of this, let's start finding out what's going to happen because she's allergic to wheat.
And because of this, Franklin decides to help and has learned of a magic mushroom in the swamp that can cure wheat allergies.
Oh, more references to what came before. Excellent. Actually, for the sake of giving a couple of details, Patricia, you want to jump in on this? So, and because of this, so, I'm going to call him Tyler. Franklin. Franklin's discovered that magic mushrooms can help with Dorothy's allergies to wheat. And because of this.
And because of this, Dorothy and Franklin's adventures at the swamp took a different turn. One that led them down a dark path.
Ooh.
Ooh.
There's the fun thing where sometimes we can create tension by being specifically vague. Do you notice that she didn't give us the concrete details, but on the other hand, there's a very specific intention behind where she's going leading up to the next person. Nice. Danny, and because of this.
And because of this, Dorothy learned that while she was on her magic mushroom trip, she was actually in love with Franklin.
Ooh, excellent. All right, Victoria, give us one more, and because of this, okay? And be aware now, by the way, one thing also to be aware of is where are you in your presentation? Where are you in your speech? We're not at the very end, but we're pretty close to the end. So we probably want to lead into some kind of resolution so that we can have the lesson after, all right? So she realized she was in love with Franklin. And because of this.
And because of this and not caring anymore because she was on her magic mushroom trip about holding back, she professed her undying love for Franklin.
Nice. So tragedy led to a victory. Excellent. And Andrea, bring it home. And ever since this day, what have we learned? What are the consequences? What's the outcome of this story?
Ever since this day, Franklin and Dorothy have become a couple. They got married. And we learned from this beautiful tale of tragedy and love and vulnerability that it is best to open yourself to the possibilities, to trust in the mushrooms that are around you, to help you to express what's truly in your heart. Yay!
Beautiful.
By the way, when you do this motion, you also have to make the Kermit the Frog sound in celebration.
I'm sorry, I just realized also that she said a dark path. I don't think I turned it into a dark path, so I apologize because I was like, oh, that's actually really cute.
Danny, what was the rule about creating a story in the creative process?
Not to apologize.
Yeah.
That's right.
You don't need to apologize. It was fantastic.
Yeah, that's right. Because
maybe falling in love with Franklin is a dark path.
I was going to say, love can be a dark path. Because perhaps he was a different species. We didn't get into that.
He might like mushrooms too much.
Yeah, he lives in a swamp and deals drugs, so you know.
It could have been dark.
Yeah.
All right, we are right on time. I want to thank you all for your time today. We've got another session on Tuesday at 9:30. Again, join us live if you can. If you're not able, it will be recorded. And we are going to be talking about emotional language on Tuesday. So we did
Friday.
Today's Tuesday.
Yeah.
Oh, God. I'm thinking today is Friday. Wow.
It
Sorry.
all blurs.
It all blurs. So yes, Friday, we're going to be talking about emotional language, which we touched on today, but we're going to go a little deeper into that. So thank you again. Thank you for being an amazing cohort who are really helping us. And make sure, check the Slack channel. If you haven't already, please fill out the surveys. We really need your feedback as we're going along so we can make this program even better. We so appreciate all the input that you are each doing. The Slack channel has all of the recordings. It's got the decks from the previous sessions, and it will have any communications. And you can use it to communicate with us and with each other. So that is sort of the one central place to go to. Feel free to use it as you need to. All right. With that, I will say thank you and goodbye, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Friday.
Guys.
Thanks all.